Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I am Marie Sweeney from Cannabis License Experts. I'm currently joined by Lance Lambert of Grove Bags and shortly by Corey Sabin from Rewaste. Today we're going to be talking about the challenges that we all face as an industry when it comes to sustainability, packaging, and just the joy of trying to come up with a balance for all of us. So I'm going to start by letting Lance introduce himself and give us a little bit of overview of what he and Grove Bags are and do.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for having me, Lance Lambert, as you mentioned, and have been a part of this community for some time. I actually grew up in Northern California around the culture and craft that everyone's so familiar with. Got into the legal industry back in late 2013, first on the media side, and then segued into the ancillary space where I am today with Grove Bags. I'm actually Grove Bags Chief Marketing Officer and also help with business development on international expansion. And a little bit about Grove Bags. We come from the community. So myself, I'm a grower, but one of the founders and CEOs, currently Jack, he's also a grower, definitely an advocate, medical first and everything else. And so we created this technology, TerpLock technology, for being able to auto cure flower, but also to be able to create the perfect environment for long-term storage and ultimately preservation prior to consumption, both again for the medical and adult use markets. So we're in 59 countries now and definitely have a lot of clients north of the border in the Great White North, that is Canada, as well as throughout the US and obviously overseas as well. So definitely, again, happy to be here and talk about packaging.
Excellent. And all right. Well, we're going to wait a minute for Corey, so I will fill people in on myself, I guess. I've been with CLE on the sales consulting side for almost a year now. I've been doing consulting and sales within the cannabis industry since legalization here in Canada. Prior to that, I'm also legacy, worked in dispensaries as a manager and product kind of procurement and whatnot. So we've all kind of been doing this for a little longer than maybe we should admit, but it shows our passion and dedication to the industry. If we've been through all of the changes, it's incredibly
I think legally we're okay to share that, right? Even I was still, the stigma and tabooism associated, and this is obviously applicable to Canada and the US alike. I think Commonwealth countries are very similar, but I'm like you. I didn't talk about it. I didn't share with people that, this plant is how I saved up school, money for going to college, to going to school after high school, until I finally came out of the green closet. And I was like, okay, it's okay to share. I'm not going to be put away for this, but that War on Drugs DARE program that some of us Gen Xers.
Oh, it was effective.
Yeah, that whole egg in the frying pan, it kind of did scare us a little bit. So.
Oh, yeah. And I have two very conservative parents. They're both retired military officers. So it was interesting telling them. My mom was super excited about it when I told her I was coming into this industry. She's a huge, huge supporter of medical cannabis, especially dealing with vets and PTSD. Dad's, he's warming up slowly. Each year that legalization goes on, he gets a little less purple in the face, but it's been an interesting evolution. And packaging is definitely part of that evolution.
Yeah, it is. And that's something, I guess, I know Corey's going to be joining just now, but just I think maybe to set the stage around some of the challenges with packaging in the Canadian market versus the US market. Like you mentioned, getting into the industry on the legal side there, back when legalization took place, I want to say as October 17th of 2018, I believe, right? It's been a minute now. So I know that one of the big things that kind of surprised me is how Canada treated the adult use market similar to the medical, and where you have really limited capabilities on being able to create a brand. And, as a marketer, I already look at how handicapped we are by way of push and pull marketing, what we can and can't do in, let's just say, social media or some of the more pure play or modern forms of advertising. But then Canada came along and said, yeah, you can only put, 20% of overall can be your logo and can be the disclaimers, but that's about it. So I know as far as branding and exposure when it comes to packaging, case in point, right?
And so a favorite brand of mine, not that you can see the logo, but
But it's so tough. I think a lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize, and I know especially people in other countries, other markets, don't recognize that has been a big challenge for the LPs, large and small, in specifically in the Canadian market. You have several hundred licensed producers up there now, and how do you differentiate yourself as a brand when you don't necessarily have that platform to do so? So I know that's one thing that many people, okay, well, how does packaging play into? And of course, our conversation and topics more around sustainability, upcycle, recycle, compostable, et cetera. But I think that's a valid point to share, is that, again, Canadians have had a challenge just in creating the brands associated with, those that are producing flower.
And definitely, I think it's one of the things that causes a challenge for coming up with more sustainable options is really our exterior package is the only thing you can do to set yourself aside. So we end up with just in jars, 1, 2, just 3 common. There's 3 in bags. Sorry. I said I had a big bag of packaging.
Yeah, you do.
Because I started in the legal market in packaging myself as well, with a supplier who's doing very well right now, but isn't with us today, so we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah. Even in the early days, right? I remember, and you might even have some, I remember seeing that flour was even packaged in what technically would be cosmetology packaging, like packaging for makeups and things like that, the double layered containers and such a large amount of
I do quite like these tin ones. These are reusable. They're just a challenge to open. Yeah. My biggest claim to fame on Twitter is trying to open one of these in a video. So, oh wait, squeeze. There we go. These I like because I can reuse these a ton. I use them for everything at home. Yeah. My spice rack is full of jars. And then Mylar bags, I use them to store extra cables and all kinds of things just around the house. But when I talk about I save my packaging, this is since Christmas.
Oh my gosh, from Hoff. There you go.
It's a stint. It's not from Hall of Flame Flowers. I haven't had it for that long. I wish I only smoked that much. But
but it is a lot of
I'm using.
To your point. It's definitely, and that's something that a lot of us are aware of. For us at Grove Bags, again, we're really a technology company first, packaging company second. So we do look at things from, to your point, from how much mass, how much material is being used. And it's interesting. We've done studies where we've looked at what is the true carbon footprint for manufacturing and recycling some of those more common packages. Again, a case in point, growing up in NorCal, being a grower, everyone used mason jars. Everyone thinks of mason jars, hey, it's a phenomenal product especially for curing and for storing your flour. But the carbon footprint for manufacturing glass and metal, and then the carbon footprint for recycling glass and metal, beyond the fact that it isn't the perfect environment for flour. It allows in UV rays, the leak down, which is the amount of transient oxygen and or moisture that can enter and exit the space, is very high. So it's things like that to factor that sometimes people think those best solutions aren't always. So it's that minimal footprint, not just from a manufacturing, but also, again, from a recycling standpoint as well. So but there's a lot of material that goes into the packaging we supply. So,
Absolutely. And it's definitely something that I think, especially, I'm not sure how it is in the States, but sometimes up here, we've got some really, really great flour from new brands, and it takes time for them to hit market. So they have this amazing product when it gets picked up, but then it sits at a warehouse after it's out of their hands for who knows. I've received some pretty scary kind of package dates when it comes to certain things. And sometimes it's beautiful. Still up in that package, it's like it was packed the day before. And other ones who haven't taken some of that into consideration, humidity controls and whatnot, water retention and everything, it's not a great reflection of their product on their first chance into market, which is, it's really challenging, and it's upsetting when you know how good it was before it ended up in that bag.
That's exactly true.
And that it's out of that brand's hands too.
And that's what I was going to say. Again, when you grow, when you're the producer, the processor, you're on the back end of the operation, you're trying to keep control of that end product as much as possible. But it's a finite amount of control because, to your point, whether it goes off to the OHS or whomever for distribution and ultimately retail sale, that does go out of your control. So being able to keep it in the most ideal environment and a lot of people don't know this, but there's three elements that are very pivotal. You touched on all of them because you come from packaging. There's three elements that really do degrade the quality of the flour. Corey made it.
Finally, sorry.
No, it's not at all.
Issues. So
I love the internet.
That was
So those three elements, we'll have to introduce Corey. Those three elements you touch on, but it's oxygen, it's moisture content, and it's light. And those three things aren't always taken into consideration when trying to sustain the highest quality of flour, which again is factored into that packaging. So it's definitely your point. It could end up, I've seen flour that unfortunately you're paying 60, 70 Canadian for. It shows up in the mail, 2 weeks later, and you don't even need a grinder. You literally could use your fingers to break up that flour in to put in a bowl or roll up into a joint, whatever the case may be. But it is so sad that to pay so much for something that the quality has been depleted so much by the time it gets to the end user,
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we have Corey with us, Corey, I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself and Rewaste and just give everyone a bit of an overview, and then we're going to hop back into this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry about that. Massive tech problems. But excited to be here and be connected with Mary and Lance again. And my name's Corey Sabin. I'm the founder and CEO of Rewaste. And Rewaste helps businesses divert their plastic from landfills. And we work with those businesses to see how we can use that waste as a feedstock to create 100% recycled plastic products.
And it's really cool.
It is.
Yeah.
Corey and I got to spend quite a bit of time together at Lift & Co. And my gosh, like from rolling trays to tubes, I mean, all in the fact, and Corey will share all this, the fact that he's expanding his program across North America, beyond Canada into the States is phenomenal, because it really is a program that hits home for our community, trying to be as green as possible. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I wanted to say congratulations on your U.S. market entry as well, Corey. That's a huge step for you guys. And it just goes to show that, the sustainability conversation happens everywhere, not just up here with our unique challenges to packaging, as we'll call them.
You know what's incredible about this industry in particular is it's literally the customers that are driving these programs, because they're environmentally friendly, they're concerned about the plant, and then that leads to a concern about the environment. And it's really the customers that are driving these take-back programs, because they want to see this waste material handled better than just ending up in the landfill.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I just want to take a second as well to anyone who's tuned in and watching this today. If you have questions for Corey or Lance, I mean, you can ask me a question too, but these are the ones with the big brains when it comes to sustainability and packaging. Please feel free to put them into the comment section, and we will address them over the next 45 minutes or so.
Awesome.
And we want as much involvement as possible, everyone. because the three of us can just talk forever together.
Yeah, to pick up where Corey was at, that was definitely, a focus for ours. And Corey and I had some great kind of sidebar conversations after our panel during Lift & Co. And that was one of the things that I was sharing, is we're really pushing in 2023 as a brand to promote upcycling. Although a lot of people, again, generationally speaking, we grew up with the whole recycling program, at least on the West Coast. I remember it being implemented more mainstream in the 80s. But upcycling is something that people have just really been turned on to in the last decade or so. But helping people understand that product can be reused. It doesn't have to always be broken down. Although, again, love Corey's program, because so many of these products can't be upcycled. They do need to be recycled and broken down to a raw material in order to be made into something new, which is exactly that definition of recycle. But upcycle, being able to repurpose it in its current state. So we're educating our consumers on, hey, this is not a sandwich bag. This is not what you used to get your flour in the traditional market that we were in when we were younger. This is not the sandwich bag that you used to get your peanut butter and jelly from your mom from when you'd go to school every day. This is a bag that has technology that can be used time and time again. So again, it's educating the consumer on that footprint from a carbon standpoint. But Corey, again, is spot on, especially Canadians. We've talked about how up in Canada, the consumer has really been voting with their wallet. And that's not just with the packaging, to your point, Corey, it's obviously as well with the LPs and with the product they're purchasing, right? They're purchasing more so from the smaller, from more the boutique or cottage style growers, as we call them, versus the large scale LPs. So
Yeah.
the consumer does have a lot of influence on what manufacturers, both plant touching and ancillary, have to do and provide ultimately to the market.
And I think to your point, Lance, about upcycling, I think there's a lot of solutions prior to even getting to a recycling or reuse state. But how can we just look at a product that exists now and think of different ways of using it? And
Yeah.
that's towards the upcycling. And we're a big advocate in these other ways to manage materials rather than just giving it to rewaste and then as a last resort we'll process that material and create new products. But is there life that we can get before that stage? And that's where I think you guys are doing a great job with your upcycling, and a lot of it comes down to the education that businesses are providing to their clients.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when we look at even just like our process in terms of recycling and flaking and then pelletizing, but when we look at packaging just being used as cannabis packaging in the industry now, like there's a lot of challenges with just the packaging as it is. And right now, like a big thing that was a learning curve for us was understanding the supply chain of what classifies a commodity material and that can have value and be sold and processed into other recycled products. But a lot of the cannabis packaging that we're exposed to, it doesn't have a commodity market. Like the containers are
True.
too small, there's mixed materials being used, but also the identification or the way to understand what type of material that is. And usually that's the chasing arrows with a number in it.
Yeah.
But even some of the packaging doesn't even have that. So it's just identified as other, good luck figuring out what this is. But
Yeah,
that's
how many
really,
recycling programs do anything with the other? People don't realize that. We again, our curbside recycling, they know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but what is other? What do they do with other? Does that end up going to to the refuse pile and ultimately just being in a dump?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
So I want to start with, just because I got all this packaging I pulled out, Corey, you missed my big bag of.
Yeah.
We don't like to admit how much I smoke, but
Yeah.
not until after 5, though.
You're an avid consumer, that's what we'll say.
Absolutely. I'm a product tester and a cannabis sommelier on the side. That's one of my favorite parts of the job, actually. Is when it comes to, so I'm just trying to think, what is the good kind of, all right, something like this. I'm going to hold it branded back because I receive a few from this, but with something like this where we have, a tin, the tuna can type thing. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I forgot which camera I'm looking at again. And it has the plastic ring on it and whatnot. So when this ends up at rewaste, what happens to something like this? What does this turn into?
Yeah, so great question. And, we've taken the responsibility to figure out how we manage materials outside of just plastic that traditionally have a hard time finding commodity markets. So, with the mixed plastic and tin, that's where we've actually developed, it's called Plastic Rock. So here you can see Plastic Rock, but what we've been able to do is use miscellaneous materials in this Plastic Rock, as well as other materials like glass or that tin. And now we're starting to develop concrete products. And these concrete products now can be parking curbs, they can be planter boxes. There's a lot of bigger applications, but we're still in the R&D phase with this concrete and using different materials for your feedstock. But essentially, with the tin, if we can't get that to the commodity market and give it to a scrap metal recycler, then we take it upon ourselves to manage these different waste streams outside of plastic. And we've been able to see really good success with our concrete mix designs.
That's cool.
Nice. And that's something that a store who's participating in your, or even someone who's not participating in your program, could technically be using that as part of their design feature within their store, which is a very cool way for them to translate that story as well to their consumers. So again,
Exactly.
just kind of bringing that whole story full circle. It's so much easier when someone can actually see something in application, I find.
It's the tangible part of it, and
Yeah.
that's the big part of what we try to do when we work with different brands. Is you've spent a lot of money on your interior design, you spent a lot of money on those fixtures, and we want to just complement what you already have. So how can we use either the recycled products or concrete now to maximize your interior design and show your customers how you're supporting this sustainable movement?
Excellent. Okay, so I am going to get into a few more kind of technical questions to kind of get you guys' brains going. So let me think. Lance, you made some good suggestions earlier today as well, so I'm going to incorporate some of those too. And I think one of my favorite one is, how do you think packaging is going to change moving forward? I know that's a loaded question considering how many different regions that we all kind of interact with, but where do you think it's going? And then my follow-up question is, where do you want to see it going?
For us, the answer is kind of one and the same. It's as Corey mentioned, more people are becoming cognizant of how much package is being wasted and how they can have an influence on what happens with that packaging after its final use. We're trying to be aware of that as well. We utilize virgin polymer material, which can absolutely be recycled, but can also be upcycled. But is that good enough? And is that what everyone is asking for? And to your point, not one given community or one given market, but across the board. We have spoken to contacts in our community that are a little more vocal, and some of those happen to be on the West Coast of both Canada and the US, especially out of Northern California and Oregon, that have tapped us for something that's more along the lines of compostable. So you've heard it here first. It's something that's very close on the leading edge, and we're getting ready to release shortly. But we actually have something that's a melt-away material. So literally, obviously that's compostable, but literally you can drop it in hot water, anything 80 degrees Celsius, so about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. It just melts away. So there you go, back to the earth. Keep it nice and simple. So while only a few people have voiced out of the masses wanting an ultimate solution like that, we were looking for something like that already. So it's great to hear the feedback from the community that, hey, we would like something that's just as much focused on the earth and green as the product that we're putting in it. Because we are, like you mentioned, I think at the beginning, we're a green community, both figuratively and literally speaking. So we always want to be aware of that. And I think that you look at what's happening with legalization, again, more so I'd say in the States right now, but in the Northeast, a lot of these markets are writing into their regulations how much of the product that's used in packaging needs to be post-consumer recycled material, or how much, if possible, can be, again, compostable or just basic recyclable. So this is something that more and more people are being aware of as they implement legalization, and that's domestic. But again, there's a lot of countries internationally that are putting the earth first as well. You look at countries like Iceland, where they're off of fossil fuel altogether, whether it be wind turbines or otherwise. They're self-sustaining on a most earth-friendly focused way that they can. And I don't think they're the only ones. I think more are going to realize that we need to minimize the carbon footprint, which again happens both on the initial production and on the recycling side of things, and just make sure that that's implemented into our community and ultimately into our industry. So that's where we see it going, and that's where we're betting on as a company.
Yeah,
Corey?
That's great insight, Lance. I love how you guys were already looking at it before it became a potential issue. Like there's already the initiatives that are being taken. From my perspective, where I'd like to see packaging go is when from our standpoint, we're collecting a lot of different material types. So from our perspective, if we can see harmonized packaging being implemented, where if we define that there's two commodity plastics, then why are we allowing other material types to be manufactured with if we know that there's limited recyclability on those? So really pushing towards harmonized packaging, focusing on those recyclable materials. And then just getting smarter in the container size, the adhesives, the labels. And I understand there's regulations around that right now that are making that challenging. But yeah, I definitely like to Lance's point, he brought this up where with legalization in the US, now they're starting to see states get involved in terms of determining the recycled content that's being used. But we've also seen now too how the cultivators, the dispensaries, the retailers, we need to look at a waste management strategy. So, you already, just to get your permit, you already need to have a waste management policy in place to support these recycling goals. So I think from my standpoint, I'd like to see harmonized packaging, which would make everybody's lives a little bit easier. And then also just focusing on a really good waste management program that reduces the barrier to entry. It's, very streamline adoption. Logistics are already there to support it. So from our perspective, that's what we'd like to see.
Awesome. And yes, that's going to take working with our regulators. And I like to say, and I kind of feel like I say this a little bit too much, but, we started out with prohibition when it came to our nemesis, alcohol, but we now have the Molson Indy. We now have a lot more kind of beyond acceptance of advertising and marketing of these products from brands that were once considered, the no worst thing that could have happened to North America. So we are going to get there in time. It's hard for those of us who've been doing this kind of day in and day out for so long to actually look back and see the progress that the industries have made. But we just got to keep that fight going.
and on that point, Mary, you talked about advertising and, whether Twitter is doing this for additional attention, but, we just saw some reduction in policy with Twitter to allow for cannabis companies to start marketing on that platform. And so I think, just with examples like that, we're getting closer to lowering the stigma around cannabis and making it a bit more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of part and parcel of this progression, right? Is we need the majority on board with us to understand that, it's not going to be the end of the world. Nobody's, going to run off and horrible things are going to happen to them. It is what it is. Yeah. It's been around for a lot longer than this legalization stage. And this is just the next evolution, and there'll be another evolution in tow in time. Sorry, got home early. So what's another question? Okay. Tell me something. This sounds like a job interview. Tell me something that you're proud that you've learned from one of your customers, or something that you learned from your customer that you were able to take and use as inspiration for some innovation.
Yeah, that's a good one. And again, it's from our perspective as a recycler in the industry. And right now we're often engaged with the engineering for the packaging and asked, how is this recyclable? And working through that process with businesses, but then to tie it back into, is this mainstream recycling or is this re-waste recycling? And making sure that we understand the life cycle analysis to be able to turn it into a product at the end of its life cycle, even if it's not going into that same jar or tube or whatever it might be. But from lessons that we've learned from other clients, it's just been incredible to get their perspective of what can be done at the end of its life. And for us, that it's been a great learning opportunity, and so thankful to have those brainstorming sessions with them.
Nice. And Lance, what is your key there?
I know.
Key client takeaway.
Yeah, So as mentioned, I try to get back up to Northern California a few times a year, usually in spring when the plants go in the ground, and then in fall when they come out. And so catching up with a few brands. One of them specifically, Soul Spirit, phenomenal family-owned operation up out of Trinity, which is kind of the often forgotten county of Emerald Triangle, but puts out phenomenal flower up there. And it was just, learning from her, it was nice because, this is still, in most industries start out this way. Don't get me wrong. They start out as a community and then evolve into an industry. You saw that with alcohol. It happened with automotive industry, et cetera. But the community is still very powerful in this space. And I think the community still has the upper hand over the industry as far as influence. But catching up with a friend at Soul Spirit said, I love you, Lance. I love what you stand for. You always endorse products that actually make an impact and are supportive of our community. But I want to wait and work with you until you offer a product that does this. And this was what she wanted, was something compostable. But it was cool, again, to hear that from someone who is very transparent and sharing that they love how we support the cause and they want to support the cause back, but want to make sure that there's a solution that meets their standards. And if their standards is everything back to earth, if that matters to them, it matters to us. So it's conversations like that that really keep us involved with this community, because kind of like Corey, Corey, his focus first and foremost is this industry, is this space. He's not coming from recycling Tesla batteries and all of a sudden stumbled across this space. The company is deliberately putting their mission statement and their goal as an entity into this community. And we're the same way. We have people who I would say are passive competitors, not direct competitors, because our technology is proprietary. But there's individuals that fell into this community where the community found them versus the other way around. And they're repurposing a solution from the food industry or from tobacco or from alcohol, some of these other, spaces. But they're just trying to find an opportunity in this niche space, again, to be a company that was purpose built and a technology that was engineered specifically for this community in this industry. We're always listening to what our community has to say. And we really feel like it's an us and we, not them and us kind of conversation. So learning what our consumers and what our customers and clients want is always the most valuable. And again, we're nimble, so we're able to pivot and adjust accordingly. And Corey, again, we were just talking about this. He was talking about how, like you said, parking chalks and park benches and rolling trays. He's telling me about the things that his company is reproducing. And these are things that are very valid and can be used in this community. He's not taking it and shipping it off to another community, another industry. He's keeping it within this space and going, hey, all those doob tubes that you recycled with me, or all those jars you recycled with me, look at the end product. You can say that these trays that you give away with every $100 purchase is actually all the materials that you turned in at your front door. Or he has programs where I think it's a discount too, right, Corey? They actually have a lot of his clients have a program where there's a percentage off for every packaging that they bring back to the facility. Phenomenal concept. We do that with bottles, right? I mean, that's what the alcohol industry does with their 5 cents credit, 10 cents credit on that actual packaging. Why wouldn't we? But again, it's us listening to that community and hearing what ultimately they want and how we can better serve them.
Excellent. Okay. Again, just reminding everybody who's tuned in today, and I know you're out there because I've been getting messages on my phone, so just put them into the chat, folks. Come on. Now, I have a question for Corey. Moving into the US from Canada, what was the most exciting stage of this kind of progression for you? And what was the most challenging to kind of navigate when it came to dealing with various states over a single federal regulation type thing?
Yeah, so the exciting part is just expanding the business. That's the part I love. It's creating the new relationships and meeting new people, seeing how we can help. So that's the part I love, and we'll continue to. And one of the challenges, the biggest challenge that we face going into the US was obviously how it's not legalized at the federal level. So shipping across state borders, having to destroy product and show that we're receiving X quantity, sorting it by material types, but just really on top of the track and trace technology that we provide in terms of our reporting. And yeah, making sure that we understand that we don't need to move the product outside of state borders. We can continue to process it within that state, create economical benefits to the communities that we're servicing. And then, on the other side of it is when we have this feedstock in these different economies, now we can work with local manufacturers for specific projects. So, if they have existing assets, now we can go collaborate with them. We've sorted our material, we know what they can work with, and let's produce these recycled products together. And so that's been really exciting in terms of looking at a challenge where we can't leave the state borders. We're not trying to, but how can we maximize our impact within these states that we're operating?
I love the whole sustaining and kind of keeping that loop closed and constantly kind of supporting each other all the way through the process from beginning to end is one of the things that I find really attractive to what you guys both do. Like I said in my post earlier, you kind of are tackling this issue from different sides of the kind of conversation. But what I love about the cannabis industry is that even if you're on different sides of the conversation, we can have conversations like this today and really kind of see the benefits and the successes of the people that we work with and kind of hype those up and support each other. Because I mean, Lance's bags are eventually, I think you said 30 uses when we talked last, or even more than that.
For up to 100 uses. We have people, matter of fact, it's interesting. Wow. I don't jump into my social too often, but I've been helping out my social media manager a little bit. And we've had several questions on what's the best way to clean them. I'm like, I love this. I love that people are figuring it out. So no, the use is, I mean, we have people who are using the same bags for 2-3 years, ourselves even. So again, it is an educational component. That's why, like I shared with Corey, and loved his program, because if you're not going to upcycle like we're endorsing, then at least to his point, recycle. Don't just throw it away. This throwaway mentality. And again, growing up around hippies in NorCal, I know I come from a different upbringing, but there is no away. Like we're all on the earth together. There's not, this isn't a sci-fi movie where we're blasting off our garbage to outer space. There's no away. There's just putting it in a hill or putting it in, in a bunker. But we need to be cognizant of everything we use, and so it's definitely a factor in conversations. But and kind of going back to Corey with with him coming into the States, we're doing the same thing internationally. Expanding while we are in 59 countries, we're still further expanding all the time. And to his point, making sure that we are aware of what the local regulations and stipulations are when it comes to proper packaging, rather be from a child resistant standpoint, from a labeling standpoint, which Canada and other commonwealths have been the leaders on, all the way through to the form and format. I'm with Corey. I always lean in on challenges. It's great meeting the new people and having new conversations. And I really feel that, like food and music, cannabis is kind of a universal anywhere I go. I mean, like I shared with you, leaving for Spain on Friday for Weed Week in Spannabis out in Barcelona. And, all the conversations are going to be centric around this plant, but getting to hear some of the challenges and opportunities that exist from country to country and region to region. It really is an opportunity for us to further educate and, again, be better prepared for what's to come in the future as well, like we were saying before.
I think it's interesting, Lance, how you've identified there is no away, right? Like we need to be responsible for what we're producing. And oftentimes when I look at the whole supply chain in the cannabis industry, we've had a lot of talks about this, but it should not be the responsible of one entity to fund any one program. And sure. So we've had success with getting sponsors for some of our programs. There's companies out there that realize, they're part of this and they want to contribute to be able to help and help offset the cost to the retailers. Yeah. Because right now retailers, or dispensaries, they're the last point of contact between anybody else and the product and the customer. So being able to just work with the whole supply chain and make them aware that, look, there's recycling programs and the cost should not be 100% on the last point of contact, and just
Exactly.
looking at being able to spread out that financial burden. We've even looked at policies that are being implemented in Canada. I know California has this, but it's the extended producer responsibility policy, which currently, for any business that is producing plastic packaging, they need to be financially responsible for handling that material, rather than the municipalities incurring that budget for a recycling program. And so we've even collected data from a majority of the containers that we receive, or the packages that we receive, to go back to the brands
Oh,
and
wow.
being able to identify, this percent of this collection is this brand. So we've pulled over 100,000 data points by trying to give the opportunity to some of the businesses that we work with to go back to the supply chain and say, look, we're paying for this. You're not obligated to yet, but perhaps there's a way we can work together. So it's really trying to understand the policy too that's being implemented, and how it relates to the whole supply chain rather than just one entity.
Yeah. Because I know that's the challenge at retailer side, is they're like, what do I do with it? Like, some of these stores are, 500 square feet. What do they do with 3 times as much packaging that's in their actual inventory? And as much as a lot of them really are excited and they see this as a benefit, they're just like, I just don't know what to do right now.
Yeah. And
so the fact that you're working with these is really great, because you're continuing that conversation through all the levels and making them aware. Because retailers have a tough time out there with, especially right now when we're looking at price compression and just a lot of people who are kind of learning by the seat of their pants to get on how to run a business, while also trying to learn how to work within the regulatory framework, while also trying to keep all of their own personal ethics forefront of mind. It can be incredibly overwhelming. So just since meeting you two, it's been great, because when people ask me, I'm like, here, go talk to these companies. They got some answers for me. When I ran into you at the after party, Corey, Tara, one of the girls who has a shop out in Vancouver, she was like, oh, we need to talk now.
Yeah.
So hopefully that went well, and that she's part of your program now. But just seeing people's face light up when they're like, oh, there's a solution out there at the retailer level. And then as well, when it comes to the LPs who are just, again, their margins are so tight right now. Well, I guess cultivators down in the US, LP is a licensed producer up here in Canada. But yeah, just for them to have an alternate where they can see, okay, yes, my initial investment might be this, but if I get to use this product for 100 times, then my margins increase each time I use that product. So, it just, again, it's just one of those things that just helps people, survive in this industry while maintaining their personal ethics and what they want to make sure stays important to their companies as they grow.
And a big focus of that with, the lower margins, and just, there's businesses that are going out of business. And so how do we sit here and implement another expense for some of these businesses? And so that's where this circular economy concept of, let's work together, but how can we introduce revenues to your business? Like, how can we create a recycled product that you can make margins on, that you can sell? Rather than just introducing an expense, and that's the end of that relationship. So it's really trying to figure out how we can work with our partners to generate a revenue stream that we become a profit center for them. Like, they want to use us, they want to distribute the recycled products because they know that they can make revenues.
It's the same. And to your point, Corey, and we take it from a different angle, because our technology actually creates a savings and retains a quality. So to Corey's point, where it can be an investment versus a cost for them, it's similar in us, but then explaining that, hey, turkey bags are not designed for flour. They're designed for cooking turkeys. Mason jars are designed for storing grandma's jam, not for storing flour. These means in which people have been using traditionally. And I always use an analogy of, if you have a washing machine in your garage, why are you still banging your clothes against a rock on the river, right? So a lot of people think that, well, this is a lower cost. Banging the clothes on the rocks costs me far less than investing in a washing machine. This is true, but what is most efficient and what gives you the greatest yield and outcome or desired outcome, right? So we have to have the same conversations, and we often do with LPs, because I think you have a valid point. While some of the larger scale producers are seeing challenges domestically, specifically, literally in my backyard in California, we have some of the largest 1 million square foot plus grow operations here, multi-license, but equally the LPs, they have very fine lines. And we saw that, right? We saw very few show up at the last few Lift & Co shows, when I would be able to see at least 50, 60, 70 LPs represented at the Lift & Co shows pre-COVID. So they are really looking at every dime and every dollar spent. But loonies and toonies aside, if you actually look at, okay, is this the way that we're saving in rather be in transport again, or in curing, in pre-distribution. So we try to come in and say, hey, the technology that we bring in our packaging, and we have white papers that have proven this, 37% increase in terpene preservation, 7% increase, 6% increase in cannabinoid preservation. So yes, we might be a little bit more, but for you to be able to retain the quality and the potency, and then keeping that moisture in there, which equals weight, which has a value as well, all these things are what equates to an investment versus an expense or a cost. But we keep getting back to this. It's education, helping them understand. When you're tripping over a pound to save a pence, as my family always used to say, you need to stop that person to go, wait, let me explain why this is more valuable to invest in versus this. And you can't just look at it, to Corey's point, you can't just look at it as a cost. You need to look at it as an investment, long-term goal, not just short-term gain. So it is a challenge. And again, ancillary companies like Corey's and mine, not to speak for him, we know the challenges that oftentimes our clients and our customers face, but we're here to support, because it all comes back to, we're all in this community together. We're not coming from another community or another category trying to help you. We are a part of this community trying to raise it up. So,
yeah, this is never a dull day. Never a dull day.
I think constant is change.
Sometimes I take
going to be more true here, right?
Exactly. I mean, some days I'd like a nice dull day, but most days I probably would have given this industry up and moved on if it was just boring plain old job every day.
Yeah, if you're still in it, and again, we talked about both of us being from traditional, if you're still in it, it's definitely proof you're passionate. I've seen a few people in the last week post up, if you're in this industry and a part of this community for financial gain and not for passion of the plant, good luck. And it's very true. We saw, not to get on a tangent or soapbox, but we saw a mass exodus of those individuals that were just looking for that quick short-term gain, really move out of the industry in 2018. It's kind of interesting. We just saw this exodus of a lot of that funny money, as I called it, investors that came from real estate or .com that just wanted to come in and the pump and dump approaches and all the rest of it. And it's interesting because this community is like the human body. When you get a splinter, you can try getting it out, but don't worry. Eventually the body is going to push that splinter out. And that seems to be what happens with this community. People that come in with the wrong intent, they end up kind of getting pushed out, and they just aren't incorporated into the community. So it's another thing, that again, I think companies just in general speaking need to be cognizant of when working in this space, especially again, if you're on the ancillary side. If you're not on the plant touching side, you need to empathize and sympathize with what the community and people that are associated with it are going through right now. And that's, again, Canada and the US market, both are in interesting places.
Yeah, they have their own challenges on both sides.
Yep.
I used to sit on a couple of panels down in the US with a previous company I worked with, and I would just sit there and listen, because I'm like, I don't understand how anything gets done in the US. Like, it is 50 some odd little countries with like an administrator at the top who tries to get people to get along, but nobody actually wants to get along. It's just like, it fascinates me that things do move forward down there. It's just true. Really interesting.
Yeah, we're very
Yeah.
similar to the EU. I think I shared this with you guys.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, it is. You know, I
Yeah.
write this monthly column for MG, and I cover all these countries that are going through legalization or have some sort of historical association with cannabis. And when I talk about the city states that make up the EU, even post Brexit, you know, right? Because you had England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland pull out of the EU. But there are a bunch of states. There are a bunch of states under the EU, and they even are kind of getting their stuff together a little bit more so than us with this 50 states and federal configuration, because we do have a lot of, honestly, we have a lot of blue hairs in DC where all the decisions are made, and we have a lot of people that have a lot of influence on those individuals that are keeping us from moving forward. But you look at the EU with the WHO, and even now United Nations, that are coming around and going, hey, you know, the states that make up the European Union, a vast majority are wanting to move forward, especially some of the larger ones like Germany, as a good example, are ready to move forward and put prohibition behind them. And props to them for that. It's unfortunate because we're kind of getting left in the dust a little bit as far as relevancy goes, but hopefully we catch up. But these are challenges, again, that, being a part of the community, like you said, we just have to address and work our way through.
And let's just face it, once the US gets their stuff in gear, we're all toast.
A lot of Canadian companies, you saw a lot of M&As. A lot of people are so busy with COVID, they didn't notice the M&As that were occurring between Canadian companies and US companies on the acquisition side, even companies that you would never imagine. But, you know, it's one thing, it's almost like Monopoly or the game of life, you know, when you saw, because I noticed this, I had run into Canadian entities in Australia, in South America, in Europe. I mean, they've had plants in the ground, Canadian LPs, for 4 or 5 years in Portugal, in Southern Australia, you know, so Canada has been smart, but you're right. There's a lot of influence on what the US does. Some countries are tired of waiting. France was waiting. Ireland was waiting, to a certain extent. England, who is obviously more conservative, and Commonwealth, with you all. But even they're kind of tired of waiting for the U.S. to move forward, you know, because they're seeing the financial opportunity as much as just the voice of obviously their constituents and you know their audience. So it's definitely an interesting time right now, globally and locally, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, France is going to be really interesting because I know they don't have much of a cannabis culture per se, say the same way North America does, but their plant medicine industry and culture is massive. So it'll be really interesting how kind of one merges into the other. I'm super excited about Ireland myself. You know, anybody in Ireland looking to start a company, hi, I will come work over there.
Ireland's a little conservative. Great place to start a company from a taxation standpoint. You're right with France. France, I give props. Some extreme capitalists had their opinion when I posted up what France is doing. But interesting fact, you know, France, they commissioned one LP to supply the product to this group of test patients to do a beta on the medical program. So nothing by way of capitalism. This LP had to supply the medicine at no cost to these patients. These patients were part of this voluntary program at no cost. I think that's something that's very admirable for France to do. If we're going to take it serious, we're not going straight to capitalism. Malta did a similar, where they started out private and segued to commercial. Portugal, where they decriminalized all recreational drugs and then created a medical program to help fund any of the psychoactive needs any of the addiction needs that are associated with the other hard drugs that exist in that community. Like, there's models that other countries have done, small and large, that I think that, again, the global movements should pay attention to, because it's very relevant to what could be, to your point, the norm once big countries and first world countries come on board. Like, what is going to be the norm at a global level, not just at a federal level, you know? Yeah.
And I volunteer in my spare time, well, more so than I did in the last couple of years, with kind of work being what it is, but I've worked in or volunteered in addiction recovery. And it's so fascinating what happened in Portugal. And everybody thinks they made a decision overnight. And I was like, no, man, they studied that for decades before they implemented their program. And I traveled there several times, both pre and post decriminalization, and just the change for their society has been epic. Like, it's just so heartwarming. Like, I'm gonna get all teary now. But yeah, it was incredibly.
People that are addicted are self-medicating. If you look at it from that perspective, taking yourselves out of, no matter if you're Commonwealth or US country based, if you look at the fact that these people are seeking help, instead of criminalizing them and teaching them how to become hard criminals by putting them behind bars, like you flip that, and to your point, it is night and day. And Armageddon never happened. They did that over 10 years ago.
Oh gosh,
in Portugal, and they're
that
a phenomenal
was
case study.
gotta be 20 years now, almost.
For
if not about that.
Yeah, for
I think the first time I was there was in
2010. So
2010.
yeah.
Okay.
And then people
yeah, because I was going to say the
so,
first time I was there was before the whole millennium, not to date myself, but yeah, that was there in the late 90s, and then several times after that, and it was just night and day. Like, it was so cool to see. And Ireland, I know they're conservative, but I mean, they've made some great strides in kind of opening up kind of where their stance is on a lot of conservative topics in the past couple of years. So I'm hoping they keep that momentum going for cannabis.
I do too. They pride themselves on being, especially the Republic of Ireland specifically, very much prides themselves on being their own thinkers and being cognizant of their own community first. Nothing against the EU or Commonwealths, but they're very much aware of what they need to do, what's the best interest for their community,
for their own little island. Yeah.
Which I definitely always give props to as well.
Yeah. And green, I think it ties it all together as well. I mean, come on, the marketing you could do there. And same with like Corey's company, like Rewaste hitting in there, like, my gosh, the cool things you could do. Just thinking park benches all over the place.
That's why it's interesting to look at all the different countries and how they're positioning legalization. And for us, we're a very small company, but we're often asked even just to provide perspective on waste management programs for, different countries, different states. And so, very interesting just to see how these other companies are shaping legalization.
Yeah, very true.
Now we have yet again managed to talk a full hour.
Slight tangents, but all good.
It's all in the positivity and the growth of and supporting of everything that all of us do. Exactly. So just before we wrap up, I am going to say, anybody have any questions, pop those into that chat. Or if you have my phone, you can put them in there. I'll try and look at it. But while we're waiting for possibly any last minute questions there to come through from both of you, I would love to know what you each think all brands can do kind of as a unified industry, kind of to consider how we can normalize these recycling programs and how we can normalize upcycling and kind of doing it cohesively as an industry. Because it's great that companies are trying to do it kind of one-on-one, but we know the most effective is when we all join together and actually do this as one big push and movement. So I would love to hear kind of from both of you on that.
Yeah, let Corey go.
Yeah, sure. So from our perspective, what I'd like to see for normalizing and getting to a cohesive place is sharing accountability across the supply chain. So if you're going to participate in this industry, then you're also going to be part of the solution, because we're stronger together. But we've also seen how margins and financial impacts are devastating this industry. So trying to get to a cohesive plan where we're all in it together, whether that's the recycling program, the upcycling options, but just bringing the whole industry together so it's not just the responsibility of one entity.
Yeah, really well put. Yeah, I'd say same thing. Like you said, it's always more success in numbers, that collaborative effort. Corey touched on something earlier. I'd have to agree, some sort of normalization as far as what standards are associated specifically with packaging. Would love to see, again, more people embrace the technology that's available. It's tough though. Toured one of the largest, I'll just put it this way, or else you guys know who it is, one of the largest grow operations in the US. And we're helping them out on the back end, which is where a lot of people implement. Our product is on the back end because of the auto cure capabilities in the storage. when we started talking about CPG or the consumer facing packaging, like, well, we already know the price is so low on what we get for offshore, you can even touch that. They went straight to the bottom line, to Corey's point. And that's tough because when you are dealing with larger operations, and again, not to pick on LPs, but a lot of large scale LPs think this way is, you have someone who's on the cultivation side, you have someone who's an operations, head of operations individual or logistics, and then you start getting into the accountants and the bean counters. Unfortunately, the decisions aren't always made by the right people. Oftentimes it does come down to the pennies. And again, that might be a penny saving here and there, but what's the overall impact? And not just, again, on sustainability, equality, potency, and et cetera with the plant itself, but what's that impact on your brand equity? Because again, I fully support what Corey's doing. And if Corey has dispensaries that are vertically integrated, meaning they're supplying obviously their own flower from their own source, and they're voluntarily a part of his program, that makes an impact on their brand equity as far as the customers and clientele that they bring in. Because I know there's people, and people can argue, people don't care. They just want the cheapest eighth, or they want the cheapest ounce. But there are still people that are more so aware of that than ever. And we need to be. And it is a bit of a woke thing, and it's something of younger generations embracing more so than older generations. But there, again, we go back full circle. There's no way. So let's all be on the same page. Let's all be collaborative. Let's all make sure that we're moving forward, but in the smartest and most efficient way possible, and not being short-sighted by the pennies. So.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with what you guys are both saying as well. Is, I guess I sit in that weird generation where I associate with the younger people, but I'm kind of an old person. And yeah, it's how you speak to your consumer. And I found when kind of decriminalization, legalization first came along, we had so many people enter the industry just going, oh, but it's just weed. Like, yeah. I can sell it, doesn't matter how good it is, how bad it is, I can just sell it and I'm going to be successful regardless. And actually taking it down to the bare bones and looking at it like any other product that we sell is you have to identify who you are selling to. Are you selling to someone who is willing to pay an extra $10 or $15 because it's in a biodegradable, 100% recyclable, vertically integrated kind of, I can get a rolling tray out of it type situation? Or is it a customer who's just give me the highest THC for the lowest dollar and I don't care about anything else? There's space for all of that in this market, same as in any other industry. Is, you're going to have somebody who wants to pay $5 for a haircut and somebody who just thinks if it's less than $300, it's not worth a penny. So we can cater to each of the consumer that way as well, and I think both of the solutions that you guys offer help kind of project that conversation for both LPs, retailers, and the bud tender as well. Like, those guys do such hard work for all of us in getting that brand story out to that consumer. They're very true.
And not just bud tender. You really hammered it home really quick. I just have to say, there has been, it totally surprised me. We hate to compare ourselves to alcohol, but that's the only other prohibition product that we can, at least domestically in the US, that we can put ourselves up against. And how many people were, I want bathtub gin and I want, imported rum after prohibition ended in the States? No. I mean, literally it was, where's the beer? Bring me the wine. I want the experiential back. So that's one thing that's baffling to me as an advocate, is why we're still focusing on a very minute percentage of the audience, which are those chronic users, to your point. If you're going to consume an ounce every few days, that's great. But the fastest growing segment in this industry is the new consumer, or the consumer revisiting the opportunity. And these are individuals that don't need THC up in the sky. They don't need the highest potency. They don't need all these concentrates. They just want this experiential that doesn't have the side effects of something like alcohol or opioids, heaven forbid. So I agree with you. We need to be cognizant of the entire audience, not just the segment that carried us through over the last century during Prohibition. So definitely have to agree with what you're saying on that front. We need to be aware of the audience.
And like I said, the story that both of your brands support speaks to the same and separate consumers, sure, which is great. Okay, so we've run a little bit over an hour, and I do want to respect everyone's time. I know you've got Spain, Corey's got his getting into the US, he's probably got calls coming at all hours of the day at the moment. And I should probably get back with my clients. So I just want to thank you both for your time. I'm really glad we were able to reconnect. I hope we can kind of do this the next time we see some updates on packaging and maybe some movements towards it. If there's some petitions out there, anything or advocacy that you guys are getting involved in, let us know. We'd love to support anything along those lines as well. And to our viewers today, thank you very much for spending the last hour and a bit with us. And if you have any questions for either Lance or Corey, you can find them on LinkedIn, or you can use the email at the bottom and we will forward those on to the relevant individuals. If you have questions about regulatory for your own labels, feel free to reach out to me. I will be there to guide you through all the really boring, dry stuff so that these guys can be creative and fun.
Very well put.
That's great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all the viewers.